everyone, welcome to the series named Conversation with Kushal once again. Today's guest is one of the most renowned guests of our country and he genuinely does not need any introduction at all. He's one of the most humble and down-to-earth human beings. He's none other than R. Gopalakrishnan, sir. It's a huge honor for me to interact with you, sir, and thank you so much for taking out your time from your busy schedule.
Thank you, Kushal. It's a pleasure to be on your program. And I hope we can have an interesting conversation.
Absolutely. Sir, so since the COVID-19 pandemic was hit, a lot of startups have failed, and in fact, a lot of startups were also forced to close down. A lot of businesses and entrepreneurs were also challenged because of this COVID-19 pandemic. I would want to ask you that how do you think have the Indian corporates dealt with the COVID-19 pandemic? And do you think that there could have been some things which could have been done better in the COVID-19 pandemic by all the corporates?
The onset of the COVID-19 epidemic is an act of nature, totally unexpected. And while all comparisons are odious, I compare it with tsunami, which is or an earthquake, which is far beyond what anybody has comprehended or understood. So, those who have been prepared for the unknown unknowns are the ones who have sailed through well. What do I mean by unknown unknowns? When you do a risk matrix in normal risk analysis in any company, including your own companies or our company, the companies where I have worked, you put down what can be the incident that can occur and what is the probability of its occurrence. In the same way, this will be a low probability, but the risk is enormous if it does occur. And this is in that category. Coming to a corporate sector, startups, grown-ups, middle-aged companies, those who have a runway of cash are the ones who have survived. Those who have had empathy are the ones who have survived. If I had to isolate only two factors, because one can give a very long list, I would say cash runway and human empathy are the characteristics of the companies that have done well. I'm not mentioning names. And unfortunately, as it always happens, there is devastation when such a unexpected occurrence happens. Many have been wiped away.
In fact, there was one recent report and recent article in Jan 2021 which stated that the top 100 Indian billionaires have increased their wealth by 35%. And even the HHI index, which is the Herfindahl-Hirschman index, that also shows that the concentration ratio in various sectors like telecom, aviation, steel, metals, that has also increased as compared to the pre-COVID era. So do you think this accentuates the fact that the Indian corporates have performed really well?
The number of people who increase their wealth can be counted on your fingertips. And I don't think that's a good measure of resilience.
Right.
The good measure of resilience is companies that have ballast, weight and gravitas like cash runway, and also have agility. If you see the animals that survive after a tsunami or an earthquake, it is the ones that are sensitive and have agility. And those are the companies that have survived. Those that are heavily borrowed, heavily stretched, heavily leveraged, who somehow think the sun will keep shining every day, and who therefore lack agility. Because the moment you borrow a lot, your center of gravity has moved up. If you remember your old physics lesson, keep your center of gravity low is the message of all physical moving objects. And in a business context, center of gravity is reflected by the debt equity ratio.
Right. That's wonderfully explained, sir. And in fact, if we follow your framework itself, you've led down the MBA framework, which is the mindset, behavior, and action whenever we classify any particular business as institution. My question here is that what weightage would you give to other financial metrics which all the analysts analyze in their particular reports? For example, return on capital employed, return on equity, maybe profitability growth, sales growth. So what weightage would you give to these other financial metrics?
It is human nature and natural in that there are certain things that people will automatically look at. It is not in human nature to look at the attributes behind what is visible. So I'll take a metaphor to make my point without too much loss of time. Every person will look at a handsome man or a pretty girl and be impressed or bowled over or whatever by the looks of the person. That's natural. You don't, and commercial metrics like ROC and total shareholder return and so on are the equivalent of a beauty contest. They are readily available. You can download, and those people who are 5 feet 7 inches tall or above, who have a reasonable face, complexion, whatever are the parameters, and who can be made up with a makeup artist, they all look good. But looking at the person behind is what creates the institutions. Every pretty girl doesn't make a great wife. Every handsome man doesn't make a great husband. I mean, we all know this. And it's the same with companies. It's not that looks don't matter. So you can't say financial metrics are irrelevant. The company that you're looking at to make into an institution must have some basic financial strengths and parameters. But then you have to look within. Say, parde ke piche kya hai? And that's what makes it for an institution. And that's what our 6 books are trying to do through the research methodology that we have adopted. We have chosen companies which are not necessarily the best performers in their category. I'm sure somebody can say that, HDFC is not the best performance in the financial sector. There are ABCs ahead of them. HDFC, the mortgage company, or Larsen and Toubro amongst engineering companies. But all the 6 companies we chose have the minimum requirement, which is that they are in the top 5 or 6 of their category. And once that has happened, then we could peer into what is behind. And that is what we have brought together, because institution building happens like, you must have a person must have the minimum looks in the eyes of the other person. If a woman is looking at a man, that man must have the minimum looks in the eyes of the woman for him to be considered in the set for her consideration. And then she will look behind and see, can I spend the rest of my life with this guy? And that's how I think the differentiation I make between financial metrics. Financial metrics are the visible features of looking good, and what we have looked at for institution building is the invisible features that really make you good.
Right. That's an amazing answer. I think the metaphor of just comparing the financial metrics with looks, that really explains us that it's the financial metrics, but more importantly, it's the management and the quality which matters, apart from the financial metrics which we are going to evaluate.
If you read all the American books on institutions or excellence, like Tom Peters or Good to Great, Jim Collins, they all select a company and say the last 10 years they've given the highest return, highest ROC, and then they've studied and analyzed the company. And my experience is those that give the highest return are not necessarily the companies whom you should study, but those who give excellent returns are the ones you should study, because there's a lot of learning. And some of these companies can strive to be the best in their industry, but they will give up something else. For example, if you are interested in watching tennis, you can't say I'll watch only matches where the world number 1 is playing.
Right.
I must look at the world number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to see interesting matches. So it's the same thing about companies.
Correct. Get it. Sir, also, like, every person in this particular country needs guidance from experienced professionals like you. And I also happen to know that you are a firm believer of menteeing and not mentoring, which is quite interesting. Like Saurav Mukherjee, whom I had interviewed recently, he also puts it very nicely and in a different manner. He states that it's like when a student is ready, the teacher arrives. So my question to you is, how can we become a good mentee so that we can leverage the advantage of industry professionals and experts?
Well, my experience is all I can share. That today, mentoring has become a great buzzword in art. There is an Institute of Coaching Federation. People become members. They become 3-star, 5-star. It has been programmatized. You got a very good left glove. You need a class coach who's trained well. Thank you very much. But you need a right glove also. दोनों हाथ से ताली बजती है. And the right glove is the mentee. And the mentee, people like you, and how I was 50 years ago, must have a mindset which is seeking out words of advice, whether they are called men or not. And I believe that those who look at the clouds and say, इसमें पानी गिर रहा है, ओस आ रहा है, they are the ones who get mentored. And those who think, ओस है तो मेरे पास आने दो, don't get mentored. And I can give many examples of people who didn't intend to mentor me, but who gave me some advice which has helped me a lot in my thinking or my career, whom I consider mentors, but they have never been to a coaching. So young people should look, in other words, they should look for the song behind the words of what is spoken to them.
And I think if we have this kind of an inquisitive mindset where we are also ready to ask questions to a lot of people, reach out to new people and learn some of the other things from them, that also adds a lot of value in terms of being being mentee.
I think young people should be Talibans. As you know, the word Talib means a student. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's got a bad connotation because of what's happening around the world. So I think, and I want to give one example of this so that it doesn't sound mysterious. I was 18 or 19 and I just finishing my BSc Physics Honours in St. Xavier's, Calcutta. And my principal called me and said that there's a company in Fairley Place. If you're familiar with Calcutta, Fairley Place is like Ballard Estate of Bombay. Your aim was to somehow get a job in that area. In those days, 60s. And they want to recruit trainees. Would you like to be interviewed? And I said, with great pleasure. It's an honor that the college is nominating me. And my dream thing is to get a job in Fairley Place so that I can happily retire after some years. I went for the interview and various people interviewed me and they said the managing director would like to meet you. So I said, I'm a little puppy, I'm 19 years old. Why would a managing director want to meet me? But anyway, I went. And he looked at me and he said, listen, I'm getting very good reports about your performance in the interview. But if you don't mind, I'm much older than you. Can I ask you a question? I said, yes, sir. He said, does your family need you to start working now? So I was initially a bit offended because I not even told my father that I'm going for the interview. And he said, I'll tell you why I'm asking the question. Because if the family needs you to work, you have the job. But if they don't, I would advise you to study further. You're only 19. In my days, which is in the 30s, you could do a little BSc and then start a job because the family needed it. In the time you're going to live and work, this won't do. So I went back and of course my father was furious. He said the family doesn't want you to start working. And I went on to study further and so on and so forth, for which I benefited. And this is what I mean by saying being a Talib. I could have just got offended, I could have thumped the table, I could have walked out, or I could have been dispirited. But I thought about it and came to the solution that he's like a father figure or an elder brother figure telling me, beta aur thoda pad ke aao, tumhare zamane mein ye nahi chalega. Which I did and I have not suffered for it. And that's an example of what I mean by being waiting for the raindrops to fall from heaven. And when the raindrop falls on you, don't think it's an aberration. Think what is in the raindrop.
Right. Wonderful, wonderful. Sir, let's take a few questions from the career angle as well, since a lot of audience who are watching this video are young professionals who have embarked on their professional journey. According to me, what is important is to have an entrepreneurial mindset no matter what you're doing. Even if you're doing job or if you're working under someone, it's important to have that freedom of decision making and have that kind of thinking. How can we leverage or maybe develop our own skills to have an entrepreneurial mindset at workplace?
There is a narrative that suggests that there are two different mountains. Since I'm sitting in the mountains, I'm thinking of mountains as my metaphor. One mountain is called entrepreneur and the other mountain is called professional. A professional is a guy who has studied BSc, MBA, chartered accountant and then naukri karta hai, to use the word. An entrepreneur is supposed to be a guy who takes big risks and starts new businesses, etc. In my view, in my career during my last 50 years, I have observed that a very fine bridge has come between these two mountain tops. And that is what I call the PEM, the Professional Entrepreneurial Manager. If you're trained to be a professional manager in the old sense, कि गाड़ी चल रहा है, गाड़ी को चालू रखो, your days are numbered. Or certainly at senior leadership, the days are numbered. If you are trained in an entrepreneurial mindset, कि यार सोचो ज़्यादा मत, छक्का मारो, which is the way entrepreneurs tend to tell their story. That all the factors were against, but मुझे एक ऐसा vision आया, मैंने कर दिया.
Right.
That's also not, their days are also, there'll always be an exception, by the way. But we are not talking about the exceptions.
Yeah.
But a whole new breed of PEMs have come up, professional entrepreneurial managers. People who are professional, which hallmarks are that they've got a good education, that they are committed to systems, processes, governance, sustainability, ESG, all that sort of stuff, that they read and they are up to date with knowledge in the field of management. But they are also entrepreneurial in the sense that they must try to do new things, not just keep in good shape the things that they have inherited. And it is precisely people who are PEMs who create institutions. And none of the people whom I have written about, Mr. Ramadurai and TCS or Mr. Deepak Parekh, they are not owners of the company. Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw is, Uday Kotak is, and that too a minority, 20%, 25%. But they have not become entrepreneurial because they are owners. They have become entrepreneurial because they are PEMs.
Right.
And it's possible for a completely professional manager like Ramadurai also to be a PEM. And so I would tell you, think of these as Jupiter and Mars. Think of the bridge on it, and that's where you should be standing.
Right. Wonderfully explained, sir. I was also reading one of your articles in Economic Times, and it was titled as "Enjoy what you do and do what you enjoy." So you had mentioned a beautiful definition of career in which you stated that it is a journey and not a destination. Now my question to you here is that a lot of times what happens is that people who are working in corporate life, they just say for the sake of saying that okay, they are enjoying their job, but mostly there's a trade-off which happens between earnings and enjoyment. If a person is getting a very high salary, even if he's not enjoying that job, he might prefer that job because of high salary.
Think of a cricketer. Think of a top cricketer like Virat Kohli or Gavaskar in his time or Tendulkar. When they were standing at the crease, waiting for the ball to come to them, the earnings was not in their mind at all. Excellence was in their mind. Was there tension? Oh yes, they must have had tension. Was there fear at the sharp, fast red ball coming at them? There must have been an element of it. Each one coped in his own way. They were not thinking of earnings. So in the moment, when you are having that experience, you are not thinking about earnings. You are thinking about the experience. इस बॉल को रोक कैसे लें या छक्का कैसे मारें या whatever, In the same way, on a day-to-day basis, I don't expect young people to be ecstatic with enjoyment. I don't expect them to come home dancing, saying, "Aaj ka din aisa nikla." Once in a while that will happen because they got a promotion or an increment or something. But you don't come back every day saying, "Aaj ka din aisa." It is like if I give you good French food and Italian food every day, then you won't enjoy it anymore. It is only when it happens once in a while and there somebody takes you to the Taj, you say, "Yaar, ye acha experience ho gaya." So think of living in the moment to get your enjoyment, but an aggregation of all those moments gives you the experience. And if you can combine enjoyment with experience and therefore wisdom that comes from it, then the earnings and everything else will fall into place. It is fundamentally, in my view, wrong to think of a trade-off with earnings. So if you're working so hard that you don't see your children over the weekend, you're not reading a story to your little son who's 6 years old, then something is wrong. Once in a while you will do that. There will be days when you'll be worked till 9 p.m. you'll come home, your son is saying, Papa, I was waiting for you to read me the story. And that day you'll say, oh, I wish I didn't have to do this. But that doesn't happen every day. If it happens every day and you come home every day at 9 p.m., then something wrong with the way you're working. You have to re-examine it. Anything that you do 24/7. Even entrepreneurs, they say, so-and-so is a great guy. He get up in the morning, he'll be thinking of petrochemicals. In the evening, he'll be thinking of petrochemicals. Raat ko sota hai to petrochemicals or aluminium or steel or whatever it is.
Right.
Those who are thinking of dhanda 24/7 are not enjoying themselves. That's for sure. But that doesn't mean they go for a party every evening. It just means you must find the right balance, because your mind is like your body. It also needs rest. It also needs renewal and refreshment.
Right. Just on this, a follow-up question quickly which came to my mind. So how would you define enjoyment? Like, when would you say if a person is enjoying his work or not?
Enjoyment is when you don't know how time has passed. So, I don't know if you remember that famous catch Sourav Ganguly took in the Goa ODI. I think they were playing West Indies. Sourav was in the slips, and he was not a great fielder, according to the pundits. But the ball was whizzing past him, and he pulled out his hand and he got the catch, and they went on to win the match. And when he was interviewed after the match, he said, actually at that moment, somebody asked him, Rajdeep Sardesai, somebody, how did it feel? How did you get this catch? He said, actually, I don't know what happened. The truth is, I just reacted and the ball was in my hand, and it turned out to be a turning point for the game. That it is a moment. So when you don't know how time passed, imagine that you are wooing a very pretty girl and she agrees to have coffee with you. You spend 1 hour with her, वो तो लगता है कि 10 minutes में खत्म हो गया. Right? And conversely, think that you're having to have tea with your boss. वो 1 घंटा लगता है कि 4 घंटा हो गया. Correct? The clock time is exactly the same. It's 1 hour. But एक ऐसा महसूस होता है कि it is only for 10 minutes or even 5 minutes. The other one feels like it's 4 hours. Right. What is the difference? One you've enjoyed, so you don't know the passage of time. The other one you did not enjoy. It was a chore. It was a burden. So if you are an income tax, since you are an accountant, I'm telling you this. If you are an income tax consultant, going and waiting outside the ITO for 2 hours to talk to the ITO cannot be enjoyed, whatever you do.
Right.
Nobody can consider that enjoyment.
Correct.
But in the moment when you have won the case for your client and got him a refund of 1 crore or whatever, that is enjoyment. So enjoyment is something where you don't know the passage of time. When your child is born, if you are just newly married, you cannot enjoy getting up at 12 o'clock, feeding the child. At 1 o'clock he gets up again. But when the child is 18 years old and he has done well, he has done chartered accountancy, he joined Aditya Birla Group, then you feel good, no? Then you get enjoyment. You've forgotten all the trouble that you took for 18 years or 20 years. That is the difference between enjoyment and
right. Wonderful.
There is no compromise on this. Enjoyment is ecstasy when you don't know the passage of time.
Absolutely wonderful. Like you just gave the example of 1 hour. It just feels like 10 minutes as compared to 4 hours. To put it differently, like it is said that the most elastic element in the world is time. So it increases when we are waiting and decreases when we are enjoying. So
right.
That's just to put it differently. So like the next question is that at what stage of career we should just think that we should have a functional role or maybe a business kind of a role, which might also expose us in order to understand the nitty-gritties of the business. Nowadays, what happens is that people are more inclined towards taking glamorous roles, staying in the corporate head offices and doing kind of roles. So what would be your advice in terms of taking those roles which are very ground fashion and which will help you in order to understand the nitty-gritties of the business?
If in my view, the person should not keep saying, I want to do this, I want to do that. The company must say, we think you'll be good at this, you'll be good at that. And so you have to deliver. I call it the 4 A's of your career: accomplishment, affability, advocacy, and authenticity. You must spend your first 7-8 years so strongly on accomplishment, delivering results to the company, that they say, yaar, ye banda bada acha hai. You must do something and give this guy rotation, send him to a different department. Then you start getting work done through other people. And then you find that you have to be affable. Not only must you be demanding, but as the surf advertisement says, धो डालो मगर प्यार से. You know, सबको धो डालते हैं तो कोई काम नहीं होता है. If you can cross that bridge, then you come to the third part of your career, when you have to have these skills of salesmanship, of advancing ideas, advocacy. And when you've done all of this, you probably become a CEO or a CTO. You must have the skills of authenticity. People must say, इस पे भरोसा करते हैं. He's saying, यहाँ कूदो, हम कूद लेते हैं. खराब नहीं होगा. That's authenticity. When Gandhiji wanted women to contribute and they gave their jewelry, they gave their jewelry because they said Gandhiji is authentic. If today you ask them to do it, they say, ये jewelry लेके कहाँ चला जाएगा? So you don't get Gandhis every day. But aspirationally, these 4 A's have been like a compass for me. And I would say from the age till about 30, 31, I was fully focused. When I think back, nobody told me all this on accomplishment. Then from 30 to 35, I was fully focused on affability. And I did a bad job of all of them. But we all do a bad job in hindsight. Then I said advocacy. How can I persuade government to have better policies? How can I go to CII and get them to do something? And then you come to authenticity कि इस बंदे के पीछे हम दौड़ेंगे कि नहीं दौड़ेंगे. So those are the 4 stages that you go through.
Right, wonderfully explained. I guess the 4 A's should be inculcated in our minds in order to have a good growth trajectory as well. So like with these so many uncertainties going around, and there are so many business decisions which senior leaders like you have to make. So how do you ensure agility in those quick decisions and ensure that those decisions also have a long-lasting impact on the institution? There are a lot of decisions which you also need to take for the betterment of the organization, but we don't understand whether the decision is correct or not until it is implemented. So what is your decision-making process?
You see, you look at the human body. Strength comes from having good bones. Agility comes from having good muscles. If you want to be a javelin thrower or a boxer, you better have a haddi. So you must have strong bones. So remember, an organization must have bone and muscle. And when you need agility, you must have muscle more than bones. And when you need resilience, you need bones more than muscle. We design our organization structure. The finance department must look just like the production department. You know, there's a big boss, there's a deputy big boss, assistant big boss, and the squares are connected. If you got an R&D department, for example, what is the agility you have built in there? How is that R&D department different from the finance? Finance department can be rigid because you must have solid manufacturing, must be rigid. You must be resilient. And every day the same product must come out with the same quality at 100 tons per day, whatever. R&D departments don't work that way. I always take the example of the human arm. You got an arm. I got bones over here. I got bone over here. If I fall down, my bone may crack. But I'm able to move my arm, and what is limiting its movement is my bone. So I can't move this way because I've got old or my bones are not strong enough. Look at an octopus. An octopus has 8 arms. And it's like a Bharatanatyam dancer. If you see the octopus moving, all the 8 arms are moving, and somehow it catches what it has to catch and brings it to the mouth or the head or whatever. That's because the octopus has agility and I have resilience. Correct. So think of agility equals octopus, and think of bone as, rhinoceros. How do you marry a rhinoceros with an octopus in your organization structure? then you start to get ideas.
Right.
But we do the same thing with all of them in our companies. Finance CFO will say the budget of the manufacturing department is 50 crores. The budget of the R&D department is 10 crores. You must send quarterly reports. You must do this. You must do that. One of them works well and the other one is smothered.
Correct. Also, like you had quoted recently that it is what you do after becoming number one that makes you an institution. And in my opinion, also, like getting success, that's okay, that is one stage. But maintaining that graph of success, that is another stage, which is usually more difficult than achieving success. There's a lot of goodwill, there's a lot of reputation. You have to maintain trust of a lot of people to maintain that graph of success. So my last question to you would be that how do we ensure that after achieving success, we maintain that graph of success?
It's all in your head, in my experience. When I'm climbing a mountain, again, I'm sitting in the Nilgiris, so mountain metaphor comes to my mind. It's hard work. I'm panting. I'm climbing. And my aim is to reach the top of that mountain because there's a temple there or there's a beautiful view of the valley, whatever. It's when you reach the top that you're the most vulnerable. So there was a US general who said this very picturesquely. He said, once you're on top of the tree, then everybody can see your backside much more clearly. You're vulnerable. And I think that's the time to remind yourself that it's far tougher to stay on top than to get onto the top.
Right.
The moment you have that mindset, you have to change the button in your mind. So, to become a CEO is everybody's aspiration. But once you get a CEO, you don't know who's going to knock you down. You have an aspiration if you're in politics to be the Prime Minister. But just ask Dr. Manmohan Singh or Mr. Modi. They say, yaar, yahan gaddi pakad ke rakhna bada mushkil hai.
Right.
So you have to know that getting to the top is tough. Staying on the top is tougher. And the only way to stay on top is to have these qualities. A, humility. B, empathy. And C, the ability to listen to other people. Unfortunately, many leaders lose all these three qualities in transit. So it is like saying you climb the mountain, you work very hard, but once you get up on top, please have a lot of nutrition and cheese sandwiches and egg sandwiches, but you finished your egg sandwiches on the way and now your tijori is empty. So leadership requires a lot of discipline and relearning. Leaders cease to learn because they think it's their job to make other people learn. But actually, they also have to learn. It's only by relearning that what I did as a general manager will not work when I'm here, if I'm to stay on, that they will be able to survive staying on top.
Correct.
Just like what clothes you wore and what equipment you had at the bottom of Mount Everest will not work when you're on top of Mount Everest. You have to understand that. And if you say कि रास्ते में ऐसे आ गया तो यहीं भी रह जाएंगे, then you'll die. And that's what happens to CEOs who get fired.
Correct. That's such an amazing answer. I think these three qualities of humility, empathy, and listening to others, ability to listen to others, these really need to be inculcated in everyone's mind. And that's when you can become successful and stay on the top. Wonderful piece of advice, sir. So thank you so much, sir, for taking out your time despite you being in the mountains and taking out your time from there. It's really very appreciable from my side. And it was a huge privilege for me to interact with you. I am sure that the entire audience are going to watch this, are going to get charged up, and they are definitely going to love all the answers which you have given. Thank you so much for such an amazing motivation.
I hope it's been useful, and bye.